Welcome everyone, I'm Oswald George. This is the first video podcast of a series of podcasts that I'm going to be doing where we're going to be talking about crucial conversations within the church, right? Me, myself, I've been a musician more than 20 years. I grew up in the church. I've played and toured with artists. I've done a ton of music outside the church also. And I'm going to have Barry and Terrence introduce themselves real quick. Go ahead, Barry.
Welcome. My name is Barry D, and I'm a musician. I'm a producer. I do mixing and mastering. I also have a video game development company called Taco Entertainment, and I'm here to chat it up. Ozzy.
Terrence. And my name is Terrence Charles, and I am a musician as well here in New York City. I'm a music and worship director at my local church, and I just love all things creative.
So the first question, well, the main thumbnail question, which brought you here, was, should musicians get paid in church, right? And so one thing I don't like in YouTube videos is when people wait until like 45 minutes into the video to actually answer the question that's on the thumbnail. So real short, real quick, your answer, whether or not musicians should get paid in church. What's your answer?
I'm telling you that one word?
Yeah, one word.
Oh man, I would say that's a conundrum.
All right, you? Terrence?
2 words, it depends.
It depends. Well, I say yes, but there's a lot that it entails, right? There's a responsibility, there's expectations, there should be a conversation going on, and musicians have to have the right perspective on it. But now I'll let you actually, why is it a conundrum? What? Conundrum?
Yeah. It's definitely a conundrum. Well, I mean, depends, like Terrence said. Now, for me, I would tell the church, if I was consulting for them, that you need to figure out what kind of church you want to be. Now, it's nothing wrong with having volunteers, but what comes with that is maybe some limitation that you don't want. The material that you want to sing, you may not be able to sing that material. So you say, well, I want to be able to cover Israel Houghton and some of these other artists, that have a little bit more advanced music. So you might want to consider hiring someone because that's what you want. Mm-hmm. So there really is no right or wrong answer. It depends on the pastor, the organization, how they're designing the church, or what they're looking to have, and to put the pieces and component in that makes sense. So you might have to hire someone to bring that sound that you want. So
that's true.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on it?
Perfect.
Right, we're done.
Go ahead.
No, it like Barry just said, it all depends on what are you looking for. Like, what level do you want to take your church ministry to? Do you want it to, be like really in the middle? If you want it in the middle, then great. Volunteers are going to work really well. If you want something where the sound your church is building, the music that's coming out of your church is something that you want to stand out, then you should heavily consider implementing a sizable budget to hire the musicians. And not just musicians, let's talk about worship leaders and singers as well, who can provide that level of service you're looking for.
Right.
Absolutely.
So that's
absolutely.
Yeah, and I think it needs to be broken down too, right? Because you have musicians that are not really professional.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? And when I say that is that they don't get work outside of the church.
Right.
Also.
Very true. Yeah.
And then also on the church side of things, you have churches that don't have a budget. Now I know we all three of us probably experienced that situation where we play for church and you were expecting to get paid and they're like, oh, you're doing it unto God.
No, that's a conversation we have before I say yes or I say no.
Right. So that's my earlier years, right? So I think that's one tip that we can give musicians right now is that always go in with having a solid conversation of what the expectations are. Mm-hmm. If you don't know what to expect, literally ask, what should I expect in return for playing for this service or for my services or something along those lines.
Exactly.
And churches in general do actually want to pay out and help people. It's just that they don't have a budget.
Very good point.
speaking of that budget part, we're in 2021. And I just feel like there's certain things, especially as the church is turning into a modern church, there's just certain things that just need to be implemented, period. So having a budget for your creative arts music department, that's just technology. That's just a must in 2021.
Right.
Because, we talked about this earlier, but now as we're live streaming, there's so much things that go into having an effective, solid live stream that takes money.
Yeah.
A camera's not $5.
Right.
The subscription services you need to now run, your services online, that is like at least minimum $1,200 a year, depending on what service you're using. So in 2021, budgets need to be allocated for things that are of high importance and of high value to church and the ministry.
Right.
So
And talking about value, there's some pastors and some ministries that don't value their music ministry in the aspect of they see the word as more important. Right. So what are you guys thoughts on that? Do you see it as music ministry is more important because it's the first thing you hear, it's the last thing you hear before you leave? Or do you see it as it's equal to the word, just as powerful and just as equal to the word?
I mean, like I said, you have to, if you're the pastor of the church, you should have to decide what type of church you want it to be. I've heard people throw in the word church. We're a word church. And then some people say, well, we're a worship church. So, it depends. Now, you may say, well, are you doing something wrong by focusing on one or the other? No. All of it is important to God. It's all important, but God is not going to say, well, you spent 40 minutes on the worship and 10 minutes on the word. I'm very angry. He's not going to say that. He's glorified. He's oh, wow, you spoke about me, So he's not like that. I can't speak for God, but my relationship with him tells me he's not like that. He's a loving, kind God.
Yes.
He's not here to throw the axe down if you didn't spend enough time or you didn't twirl around, a few times, and, knock yourself on the floor. He just wants to be worshipped, and I've heard people use the word, some pastors say to me, well, the Bible says my house should be called a house of prayer. I get it. Yes, of course. It should be called a house of prayer, but it doesn't mean you can't do other things in the house. Mm-hmm. Besides that, he just said that was the name of it. So you can kind of get the idea of what is the mission, but he never outlawed dancing. Some people like to dance in church, Some people like to paint in church. Right. And some people are like, oh, you can't do that, but I never read anything that said you couldn't do that. Yeah. I think all of it is good. It's all good. Not one is more important than the other. It's
right.
Good,
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed. So that brings us to our next question, which is a bit kind of focusing on the musician side of things. Where are musicians currently failing when it comes to ministry, with their balance of church and ministry? I'm sure there's a lot of pastors, a lot of people out there already got a long list, like they don't pay tithes, they don't sit for the word, stuff along those lines.
You didn't come to the prayer meeting.
Can we start that question with another question?
Go ahead.
How are these pastors and church leaders helping these musicians get through that process?
That's a good question too.
Because, I know you talked about paying tithes, for certain kinds of musicians, it's a hustle. So you're literally trying to make as much money as quick as possible to do whatever it is you want to do.
That's exactly how I used to be, man.
Right? But the thing is, and pastors, I've been in situations where pastors they don't want to have a direct relationship with the musicians because of the responsibility that they're going to be held to now steward and pastor these musicians.
Wow, that's deep.
Right? And so people don't do better if they don't know better. So and as I'm growing in leadership, you always have to ask the hard questions first. It's just like, what is your relationship with Christ like? Like, yeah, you're a great musician,
right,
but is your playing skill gonna get you into heaven? Mm-hmm. Like, you can, I know a lot of guys who are really skilled and great at what they do, but they out here slaying everything that they see, and it's just dude, like, what do you want to be known as?
Right.
Like, do you want to be known somebody who is a great musician but also have great character and integrity, or a great musician but he might take two of your choir members home when service is done? Like,
right.
Well, what are you looking for? And I think the falling short aspect of it is, as leaders, how can we help them be better the moment that we decide to bring them on and as they enter our doors? So in terms of balancing, profession and ministry, a lot of churches don't help within that aspect, because they just say, oh, we hire them as a hired servant to do X, Y, Z. Right. They're here for rehearsal. They're here if we have a Thursday night service. They're here for Sunday. They get their check every Friday, and then that's it. They're done. Mm-hmm. But there's no next step in pastoring them. Or who's the leader, who's the minister of music to teach them to set the standard of how things should be.
Yeah, well said.
And I think that's where we should always start with asking those questions about falling short, is if you're bringing me to do something as my leader, how are you helping me? Because if I got hired to work at a company, my boss and my manager is going
to clear in the beginning
exactly what the roles expectations are, but now he's going to give me the tools to be the best that I can be at my job, and those values I learned at the job, I'm going to start to take them outside of the job once I learn them and they become a part of who I am.
Right.
And so I feel like a lot of churches don't. I say this, I feel like a lot of black churches don't have that kind of decorum in place to help with that.
Right. I agree with that. I do believe, though, I guess maybe because I'm always in the mindset of self-development and being the better version of myself yesterday, that I'm constantly seeking out to make myself a better version of myself, that I believe that we should still be introspective and be looking for what we can improve on and share amongst other musicians.
1,000%. But a lot of these cats, our upbringings are much different than some of these other musicians that we know. They come from broken homes. They've been in the system. They really didn't find out their purpose or their talents not until maybe while they're at the end of high school, about to exit out of high school. So for them, it's that hustle mentality. It's just like, I have to do what I got to do. It's about the gig. I got to do what's best for me. Right. I have to put myself at the forefront of every decision that I make. Yeah. And so when you're doing that 100% of the time, there really is no room for self-development. And I'm not saying that that's an excuse, but you got to understand, in dealing with being a leader and dealing with people, there's so much layers to personalities and characters, and I think that's something, again, that we don't talk about. Yeah. I used to work at this church, and legitimately the pastor would be like, "Hey, how are you doing?" And it wasn't like one of those just in passing, "How are you doing?" Yeah. Like, he really wanted to know. Right. He really wanted to know how I was doing. And it made me think. I'm just like, all right, I see value in this. I'm just not hired to, make the people dance or whatever. He really wanted to know how I was doing. And he would, every time we interacted, he always asked that question, and he'd give me 5 to 7 minutes. We talk about whatever. And that was it. And I think sometimes a lot of pastors, they're too occupied with other things to focus on absolutely the heart or the person that's leading their music ministry. And that's another thing we could talk about. Just they hire the best name or whatever, and they're not really looking at that person's integrity. They're not looking at their heart. And so, and then they run into problems, and they say, "Well, we didn't know." Well, did you take the time to find out? Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think a lot of pastors in general too are wearing a lot of hats to begin with. Yeah. They're doing too much.
As a church leader, that's a whole nother conversation.
It's so true. It's loaded. You said where the musicians failing?
Yeah, where can musicians do better when it comes to ministry?
Oh yeah, right? Yeah, and I like what you said, that you always looking to try to improve yourself. Not everybody's like that, especially in like you mentioned the younger generations. I've noticed a lot of the younger musicians from 8 to 30 maybe, you know, is, I know, not even maybe 25 maybe, it's the TikTok generation. So it's all about, I'm going to show you all this great stuff I can do. I'm famous, everybody knows me. Now think about it, you're already known, and somebody says, I want to hire you, but I'm famous. You know, so it's a whole nother mindset. So
right.
You got to deal with that. And these people, you see those guys, they're ridiculously amazing. I'm just like blown away how incredibly gifted they are. Better than, well, I shouldn't say better, but I mean, like,
The raw talent is amazing.
Like, people are 30, 40, 50 years old.
Yep.
And so as a pastor, if I knew this person was on TikTok and they had all those views, I'd be like, it's a whole other dynamic now than you had before.
Right.
Where you saw a guy who was really good and say, oh, you good, I'd like to bring you in. And they may have some little humility maybe, but now everybody's like famous now. So now you gotta deal with that. So as far as bettering yourself, I mean, that's a tall order to better yourself when you already feel like you're already better. But you have somebody, that's why volunteers on some pastors, you know, landscape is better, because you can shape a volunteer.
Right.
If they're coming from a humble place, as opposed to somebody who maybe went to Juilliard, then you got to deal with that. Well, I went to Juilliard, and so, you know, oh, that's great, but can you come to, you know, they're like, well, so there's so many things you got to cut through.
Yeah.
But I think what covers it all is a good relationship with the person that you're dealing with.
Yeah.
Right.
You know,
Right.
that would cut through it all. But I think every musician should not just focus on their craft, but they also should focus on why are you here. You're here to serve people who are Christians. You're trying to help them be better Christians. So how you make them a better Christian if you're not a better Christian yourself? How can you do that?
Right.
So they got to take that into consideration, what they're doing and who they're doing it for. Yeah.
You know, something my dad has always taught me is just like, anywhere that you go, you should always be there to be a betterment and an addition to what you're doing, and not be negative or a subtraction.
Right.
And I think a lot of musicians, like you spoke to, the humility aspect, they walk in the room saying, I'm the best at what I do.
Right.
And they're not looking at the bigger picture, like they, you know,
Right.
drumline, one band, one sound.
Right.
Like they're not
Right.
looking at the bigger picture of what can I do to make sure that this is the best thing that I'm a part of.
Right. Right.
I just in the whole aspect of, even if you were to come in there with the aspect that I'm not connected with the church community or spiritual wise or whatever, if you were to come in with the aspect of this is business, you're still falling short. Because if you go to a company or you start working for a company, you're expected to do more than you're actually hired to do. And you show your value when you actually do more than you're hired to do also. When you show them, okay, I can do this, I can do this, I can do this, what do you want? They end up giving you a raise based on you doing more, going above and beyond what you're actually... So that's another aspect of it also.
Yeah, that's. But again, upbringing, I feel like, is one of the most important parts that play in those things, because a lot of guys don't think like that. They don't. Like, you know, I worked at a church where we were in transition of one music director to another music director, and, you know, the one that was coming in, like, I didn't have to, but I said, you know what, I don't want this guy to fail, because, you know. So I said, let me walk him through what the expectation is, like, on a Sunday, how it runs down. And so, you know, he really appreciated that, because he's just like, yeah, they definitely didn't tell me that this is what they were looking for.
Wow.
And I said, oh, I got you. Like, I got you. And so, you know, it's just one of those things where you never know where you're going to be needed to help somebody overcome something.
Right.
In a musical situation, in a life situation.
Yeah.
So it's just always good to be wanting to do that.
Which brings us to our next question, which you already kind of answered some of the where are churches and ministries in general falling short with where their music ministries are concerned? And this could be broad. This could be music ministry in whole or musicians in general. And I mean, I know you just mentioned stewardship, right? So I think it's important. So I'll continue on what you were talking about. I think it is important that churches actually steward their musicians, not only their talent, but their time too, and invest in them spiritually. It's more important to invest in them spiritually than anything else. So that's one aspect. Anything else?
And I think also in terms of the spiritual aspect, especially now that we're in the midst of a pandemic, it's just like, find out about their day-to-day life. Like, how are they doing? Like, we know that they show up and they play, and I'm sure the pastor has somebody who's in charge of the band, but people always feel more secure and better when the top person, like if I'm the CEO of a company and I go to the floor and I speak to my employees, they're going to want to now do their best because I've actually given of my busy, valuable time to impart some sort of wisdom into them. And I feel like a lot of people, and I've been in that situation where I'm just like, well, all right, bro, like, all right, I don't see you. I don't know who you are. Like, that's it. And then there's no connection there.
Yeah.
But, if you just take, like that pastor that I work for at that church, just 5 minutes, just to, check in and to see, how's your wife? How's your kids doing? Things like that. It holds more weight. It holds more value because, you know what? They are mindful of me.
Right.
They do know that I have a wife and that I have kids.
Yeah.
And it's just those little things that always go a lot farther than the big things, at least in my experience. You don't gotta talk to me for 5 hours, but just doing that small thing is always valuable.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I would say falling short is not making it clear what the expectations are. Very like you mentioned. That it's one-on-one to me.
Right.
Like, okay, this is what, and put it in writing.
Yeah.
This is what we're looking for. Are you that person? And then the person should also have what they're looking for in a pastor. It goes both ways. And so you can't really be upset if the musician's not giving you what you wanted. We didn't make it clear. And musicians can't be upset if they didn't make it clear what they were looking for. Now, unfortunately, sometimes what could happen is that they may look past all of this for the money. I just want the money, really.
Right.
Then it becomes a problem because then now it's the money that's really you have a relationship with the money.
Yeah.
Not the pastor, not. So you want to have a relationship with the pastor, and that's so important. You can't really. It's going to show up in one way or another.
Yeah.
It's going to be obvious. I'll say this to try to make it short. I've been in places where I've worked for a church, and I never really spoke to the pastor. Like, I think we had one conversation.
See?
And I actually remember the conversation, and he said to me, "Don't be weary in well-doing," and he walks out the door. And that's really the only thing he said. So
Wow.
It was really weird. And because of that, I felt like disjointed, and eventually I just left.
That's the thing.
Yeah,
Like,
right.
it's just like,
Yep.
where's the connection?
Right. So I definitely know musicians that have left churches because they did not have community there.
Right.
So even though they came in as like, okay, this is my thing to play, this is my main source of income or whatever, they still wanted to have community there. And because they didn't have community there, and that was a stigmatism that the church had, or the body of the church had already, that, okay, they're musicians, they're not gonna want community. So it's kind of like on both sides, but the musician wanted to have community, and his reason for leaving was because he didn't have community.
Right, exactly. You feel lost. You
Right.
feel lost. You don't want to be lost. Yeah.
But then that like falls on, leaders, because whoever is in charge, I always say this, like as a music and worship director, if I'm in charge of something, like you have to be intentional about fostering that community. You have to make sure like everybody is comfortable with everybody, because again, it's going to translate in the playing.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
If you're not comfortable,
Absolutely.
if I'm playing, keys and then the singer, like, we don't have a good personal chemistry. It's just
I've
like
seen people making eye contact, like.
you know what I'm saying? It's just like it's gonna be awkward. It's gonna be weird, and then the overall mission of what we're doing is gonna be mispresented, and it's gonna be missed.
It's so true.
And so those are things that whoever is in charge of that, they need to take the next step to say, all right, you know what? Let's do a social gathering. Like let's I'm the worship director, and I've done this. Let's come to my house and let's have a game night. Let's let's
Yeah.
just eat some chicken wings and let's relax. Like but just something where everybody feels involved. The musicians and the singers.
Right.
Because growing up in church, the band rehearses, singers rehearse separately. We all come together and then we rehearse and then we go home and end the church on Sunday.
Right.
But in a place where the singers and the musicians, they can interact with one another, learn more about each other, and we can start to build a relationship.
That is so huge. That is so huge.
And I feel like people don't think about that because people don't think, like you said, they don't think about community. Community is not a big, fostering community is not a big aspect because, I think you said, pastors wear a lot of hats. Their goal is, all right, this word that I'm preaching,
right,
making sure we got a lot of seats in the pews,
right,
making sure tithes and offering is good so we can handle whatever we need to handle. So thinking about community for arts or music is always at the bottom of the totem pole.
Yeah.
So, and then, yeah.
Absolutely.
That's a good point. So the next question is, in what areas can ministries actually improve on? So we talked about the community. So now we can talk about the musical aspect of things, of like the actual production side of everything, the music side of things.
I'm gonna let you go first, Dad.
So now we can actually talk about the repertoire stuff along those lines, and not persons in general.
Yeah, and I'm with him. Like, wow. That's an hour-long conversation, and it's like, where do you even? No, it's true. Where do you even start with this? Because you know what it is. I don't want to be there to be a disconnect between the pastor's vision and the music ministry vision. I don't want that to be that because the pastor's, he wants to share the word, and then you're like, oh, I want this. That's like, I don't know that. But that's what everybody's doing.
Right.
I didn't ask you for that. So there's a problem. There's disconnect. There's a clashing visions.
Right.
You don't want to have clashing visions. You want to be with a pastor that thinks the way you think.
Yeah.
I do like the idea of a musician pastor because trust me, they'll be like, love it. But
it does. They do hit differently. Musician pastors with experience as a musician,
right? Exactly.
They do,
exactly. They play like.
But with musician pastors, they do hold you to a certain standard.
True.
In your musicianship, especially if they're really good at what they do.
True.
Right? Like I've subbed at churches where the pastor is a musician, and
like
when you're a new face. Like they're watching you, just like, oh, I wonder what you about to do next, and then that's how you know if you're gonna get another call. Like, thankfully, I've got another phone call to come in and sub again.
Right.
They just sitting there, just looking at you, just like
it's true.
I'm just like, oh man, here we go.
It's so true because they know that they have knowledge. Like a pastor does not a musician. They don't have the knowledge, so they're a little bit more appreciative. But then somebody who is a musician. You might have more scrutiny on like that chord, and then you're like, oh wait. So it's true. There's pros and cons to both sides. But to improve, I think you mentioned earlier about the budget. That's one thing. You should have a budget. Now I had somebody telling me we don't have a budget for the music ministry. I'm like, what? And it's kind of I can't wrap my head around it. So how does this work then? So one, you should try to set aside a budget because you're gonna need stuff.
Yeah.
Your keyboard, everything. Yeah. Especially if you want to do modern worship. You mentioned modern worship. Right. Now if you want to do traditional worship, okay, piano is fine. But back to what I said earlier, what kind of church do you want to be? Yeah. What kind of ministry you want to? So it goes from having a plan. One, to have a plan, have a budget, have the right type of sounds. Yeah. You might want to introduce a computer. So it's so many things you got to put on paper. Matter of fact, I would tell any church if you're starting a music ministry, everything should be on paper. From the type of music you're looking for, the amount of money you want to spend, what are your goals, what are projections. That's where they need to do better.
Well said. Well said.
That's very done better. Plan.
Well said. Very good.
That's very, very true. Yeah. I think going into what you're saying. Is the tech side of things. I'm huge on tech within church. I feel like, as I stated earlier, we're in 2021, and I just feel like companies are making technology that is so not just user friendly, but they're not only making it for like the music industry, but they're making it for the church role. And I feel like everything wraps up into one.
Yeah.
I always tell people this when it comes to the tech side and having the proper equipment. People are going to spend $250 to see Beyonce, right? I've done it, you know? And so with that, when they walk into a church building, they should be able to, especially if it's a charismatic church, you know, where, you know, you want the music to be like bumping and really great. They should walk into the space and be like, wow, this is church.
Yeah, I like that concept.
Right? So, you know, making sure that, you know, everything from top to bottom is of the greatest quality. I'm not saying you have to like go out and spend the money that Beyonce and her team is spending, but you're spending to meet that demand. Because if the goal is bringing people who are lost, you want to give them something of shared value. And it's just like, I had this at the Beyonce experience, but y'all went to church and this was, and you know, this is why Michael Todd and Transformation Church, they're thriving. That arena, you walk in there, you think you at a Jay-Z concert and it's bumping, right? And so that's why they thrive, because they know the demographic that they want to reach. And that's another point, knowing the demographic on your target audience when it comes to the music that you're doing in your church. That is a huge, important part in moving up the plane. If you know who you want to target, then you now get those things to put in. So if you want, you know, that 18 to 35 demographic, then you definitely want to go ahead and make sure, you know, you got those big 18-inch subs, you know, you got everything sounding really great, and you have the lights, the everything, and it's moving forward. So from a technology aspect, you know, like Barry was saying, what it is you're looking for. Like, you know.
I like that word you used, demographic. I like that. Some people have a problem with that. Well, you're supposed to reach everybody. Yeah, but you know what though? There's other churches. So if you're an older person, you like an older church, and you go down the street. This church is for the younger people. Now, not that you should exclude anybody, but you have options. Not like you want to sit there and be like, don't do that, because it's not right to do that. And if this, the Bible stated that he has a cattle on 1,000 hills. Well, he sure had a lot of churches. Trust me. Even in New York, church.
Brooklyn alone.
So you got choices. You don't have to, you know, go to whatever that. I'm not gonna say the name of. I'm not gonna say the church, but.
But to your earlier point, and this is the perfect time for me to mention this book too, The Heart of the Artist, which is really awesome. But in it, in the very beginning of it, it talks about what the church was in the 1600s. Like, it was the lighthouse. Everybody went to the church to listen to any type of music, Mozart, classical, to watch plays. The church was the place that you went in the 1600s. And so, of course, we far from that now. The world kind of took over of that whole category in general. So, that's one of the things also.
I have another thing to add in terms of, like, you know, improving on, is putting budgets for good engineers and tech people. Like, having a great sound engineer is gonna make the singers and the band sound great. Like, I've worked at churches where, like, we have a great band, but then it's just like the engineer, like, is a volunteer and he's only touching the board on Sundays.
Right. And
it's
it's not alive. And it's not. It's like he set it and gone.
Right. That's it. That's it. And I think, you know, that's another thing churches don't necessarily look at, is having great sound technicians, having great people who are in depth. They know, you know, these mixer boards in and out. So if, you know, you want to upgrade, all right, perfect, great. Have your Digico rep talk them in a Zoom meeting on how to, you know, get what it is that they're looking for. Right. And so I think those are all important things in enhancing the presentation of music and worship in the church. Not just having great bands and great singers, but great tech people who can now put these things together so everything can come together and be great.
Right.
That's huge. Like, remember I mentioned earlier about disjointedness? That's another disjoint, you know, because you practice and did all is in the sound guy. It's not translating what was heard by the people. After I had this guy, he came to me, he says, you know, I know you know mixing and mastering. He goes, I think I made a big problem with the church. We recorded a CD, And when I played it back, I was hearing it in mono, and there was some buzzing on there. You think you can help me? Wow. So I can tell he was really nervous because they worked really hard to produce the recording, and he didn't capture it right. So he was really worried. And I told him, I said, I'm sorry, I can't fix this.
Wow.
So
overdubs.
So you can see what the serious, yeah. So
it's a lot of overdubs.
That's a serious, that one person stopped the church from moving forward in a sense of,
that's
not capturing the sound that they were going for.
You gotta, and that right there, I always, when people ask me about that, I said that should be a really integral part of your budget. And now that you're live streaming, having a broadcast engineer who understands that, like that is now an integral part of your budget.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Like those are things that are highly important.
Yep.
Because like I said at the beginning, it's 2021. Yep. Things are changing. Yep. How are we meeting demand of that change?
There you go. A solid word, but if they're hearing it horribly,
there's a lot of churches that if I start watching their live stream, if it sounds bad, all right, who else is on TV today? And that's it. I'm being honest.
It's true.
I'm being honest.
It is so true. It's something about. Maybe it's just maybe me. You all feel the same as me, but I just like things that are produced so well. It just it makes me smile. Yeah. When I hear something and it's like, I can't take it. Yeah. So I like quality. So I may go to some of the bigger TV ministries that are out there.
Listen, like I agree with you. Even when it comes to like just being a consumer of art.
Yeah.
If the quality is not there, I'm not investing into it.
Right.
Because it's just like
it's true.
Like I'm at an age now where it's just like I know what I like.
Exactly.
And I know what I want it to sound like. And if it doesn't sound like that, I'm not here for it. So
it's true.
Well, it brings us to our next question and last question. Mm-hmm. The current Christian music industry. Where do you guys think, and your personal opinions on how it's going and where it should be going moving forward?
You want to take that first?
It's stagnant. Well, let's talk about, there's two different industries. You got the gospel music industry and the Christian music industry.
That in itself upsets me because you guys know me, Barry knows me. I love the mashing up of styles. I love to have like the drummer playing a funk pattern, the bassist playing a R&B pattern. Yeah. I'm playing banjo. Yeah. It's like what category is that?
I love it.
What category is that? So the Christian music industry, if anything, they need to definitely change where stuff is so mashed up. It's like a category in its own as a whole.
But the reason why that's not going to work, unfortunately, is because in any industry, it's always driven by dollars and cents, right? And so with the problem that the gospel music industry is having right now is that there is no dollars and cents unless you're a legacy artist, unless you're a Kirk Franklin, a Fred Hammond, a Marvin Sapp, a Donnie McClurkin. If you're a legacy artist, you're making money because you came into the industry when it was at its peak. Right. And so now you're making money from, not currently now, because Kirk, I don't think he's making a lot of money off of music, more so off of royalties, right? And touring.
Yeah.
But in terms of making money in the current stage with streaming and all of that, that's a whole nother conversation that I feel like we need to, be more aware in the gospel and Christian music industry. But I feel like the reason why the gospel music industry is not where it's at is because legacy artists still have a hold on the gospel music industry. Whereas the Christian music industry, the reason why it's propelling and moving forward at a really good rate is because legacy artists realize, okay, I understand that my reign is coming to an end. Now let me start preparing somebody else to take over that mantle and start preparing them. So like people that I think about, like Ron Canoli, right? You guys remember Ron Canoli, right?
Of course.
Okay. Ron Canoli, he trained people like William McDowell in Israel. He gave them the keys to the kingdom and said, all right, take it to the next level. And that's what they've done. And Israel, like now more than ever, with his association with his wife, Adrian, like is really ingrained in pop culture. Like it's crazy. I was talking to somebody who's not a Christian, but we were talking about the show that Adrian's on, and she's like, yeah, I like her husband's music. And I said, oh yeah? She's like, yeah, once I found out who she was married to, I found out who he was, and I like this movie, and she talked about the Feels Like Home recording, and I said, wow, he's in pop culture right now.
Yeah, that's true.
He's in there.
That's very true, and that's a really good thing. I mean, of course, not get into all the mess of it, but but whatever. God knows what He's doing, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But wow. Yeah. What was the question?
What are your thoughts on the current Christian music industry and where it's headed? What do you think should change? Stuff along those lines.
You said a lot of good points, Terrence. The streaming thing is just changing all the metrics.
Yeah,
and it's
but
like
for all the industry.
Yeah, so you ask yourself, okay, so I want to do this recording, right? I want it to sound great. I want to spend $200,000, and then you're looking at the pennies that are coming in. Wait, spent this, but when I'm getting back that, so your return on investment is just not there.
Right.
That's
Even 200,000 listens is not even $200,000.
That's not going to do anything for you.
Right.
It could be discouraging because in order for you to get 1 million plays, you got to do a lot of work.
Yes. Yeah.
So now it could be discouraging for people who are trying to get it to the industry. Now that's if you're doing it independently. Now if you decide to go with a record label, which probably makes sense at this point because they have all the marketing dollars you need to get that 1 million plays or 20 million plays, so they can help you get to the right people. So at this point, the streaming is almost pushing people to get signed, because before it's like, I don't want to be signed. I want my own masters. But here's the problem. Now you're not selling CDs anymore, so now you can't get the streaming, so now you're going to back to the labels. Maybe it's a conspiracy theory, I don't know. But at this point, it seems like that whole independent movement is kind of like stuttering, and it's like, maybe I should go back and get them to,
I don't think so.
You don't think
I just
so?
think independent artists don't know the full details of the business. A lot of artists don't know a 360 deal versus a pub deal versus distribution deal.
Yeah.
Like they don't know the different elements of those deals, and I feel like I see it more so in gospel music than I do in Christian music. In gospel music, these independent artists, like they put out a song. Do they know how to collect metadata? Do they know how to make sure that their songs are eligible for charting on Billboard?
Right.
These are all the little details and things that I see in gospel music primarily that they're not aware of. But whereas in Christian music, it's more community based. These songwriters work with each other time and time again.
That's true.
And so
Very true.
I can say we wrote a song together, and then we're gonna write a song with another popular Christian artist. Okay, this is what you do in order to get that and get that. Because you wonder why a lot of especially in CCM, you hear like 5 artists do the same song over and over again. It's because they all have the network. They all wrote the song together. And they find out how to make money from a publishing deal together. So if any one of us play that song, we're gonna make money off of it.
Right.
I like where you're going with this. Now, here's an interesting situation. In New York, I don't see the community that you see in Nashville. So this was what happened to me. So I traveled from New York to Nashville, and I came for a certain event, and a big event, and I parked someplace because I had to use the restroom. So I was like, where do I go? So I just walked to the building, and the guy was like, how can I help you? I said, I'm here for the double awards. He was like, oh yeah, I know about that. And I said, I'm from New York. He goes, wow, all the way down from New York? I said, well, I'm associated with them. He says, I know a lot of people there. And I said, can I ask you a question? Do you mind if I use the restroom? He said, oh, absolutely. He should. I use the restroom, and he said, by the way, we do publishing here. This is where we do recording. This is the studio. All the writers, and we come here every day. We write songs.
Wow.
And he goes, matter of fact, if you want to be a part of it, you can be a part of it.
Wow.
I was like, is he okay? I said, is he okay? First of all, you let me use the bathroom, number one, and then you showed me around your studio, a New Yorker. And then you said invite me to your session.
Right.
I was like, I see the difference.
So we moving to
I see the
Nashville.
difference.
We moving to Nashville.
If you want to be a songwriter,
I think they don't pay taxes or something.
And the thing is, it's just like from the region from like Charlotte, where Elevation is, down to Atlanta.
Yeah.
that's that pocket where all of those people reside.
Yeah.
Majority of them are in Nashville,
Yeah.
but you have a lot of them in South Carolina and Charleston, the Elevation Camp in Charlotte, and then a lot of them in Atlanta. And so that whole radius right there, they're always traveling back and forth,
Working
writing
with each other,
songs
yeah.
together, working with each other.
Absolutely.
That's
And
awesome.
We need
It's
that
like
in New York.
it's a solid community.
Uh-huh.
Of course.
Yeah, yeah.
Of course.
I guess it's also a New York
course.
thing. New York, it's
just
that New
all-
York personality.
all over
It's
the
just,
place.
it's
It's
there.
just- and nobody.
Actually, I have to disagree that it's a New York thing because if you look at the theater industry, they're very close knit. If you look at the engineering community,
Oh, that's true.
especially
No, that is
the
true.
unionized engineers,
That is true.
They are
Even
very
musicians.
close.
That is true.
My musician network.
I mean, yes, our musician network,
network.
yes. But I just feel
Yeah.
like in the sad to say black gospel culture,
Yeah.
there's no sense of community and unity.
I know what you mean. Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that is why gospel music is
segregated from.
it's because of that. And I know like they're really trying to, bridge that gap. They're going hard. Even going back to the years when Toby Mac and Kirk Franklin were doing collabs together.
Right.
Like I know they're being purposeful in trying to bridge that gap. Excuse me. But I think it's just when something is so ingrained in a culture. Because if you go back to the black gospel Christian culture, it's just like we're struggling and we're just gonna keep struggling.
Right.
And that we can talk about that on another day.
All right, so I thank you guys for being here. I'm gonna end with this. So I just mentioned the book, but I didn't say the title. So it's The Heart of the Artist by Rory Noland. Awesome book. I'll read just like what it says here on the back. How do you handle those words as a creative artist? Somewhere in between pride and self-abasement lies true humility, right? The book in itself covers so much. Servanthood versus stardom, excellence versus perfectionism, because we all can try be perfectionists at times, the spiritual disciplines of the arts, and the artists in community. So I suggest you guys go out and get it. Every music director, every artist in the church should read this book. It's an awesome, awesome book. And that's it. Thanks, guys. See you next time.